You want to kill her, you gotta go through me first.
What's up, Goth Gamer Nation and Goth Hunters, and welcome to another episode of Darkened Streams, wherein I review every one of the 327 episodes of Supernatural, or however many YouTube allows, before shutting me down. What did we learn in the last episode? Never talk about the supernatural. The second you open up, that person you foolishly confided in will probably go mad from the revelation or die. Oh wait, that happened because you didn't say anything. Sometimes when a shitty racist person dies, they make a shitty racist ghost that needs to be killed again, but in their new game plus they've developed superpowers. And finally, it's a tough job, but it ain't without its perks. Watching Dean kiss people while you stand awkwardly in the background. Season 1, Episode 14, entitled Nightmare, was written by returning team Sarah Gamble and Riley Tucker, coming right off the heels of Faith, which I did enjoy, so we might have another certified classic on our hands. Even though there is a considerable nosedive in quality once Gamble was made showrunner, she did have writing credit on a number of good episodes, including episode 10 of season 3, which is one of my favorites of the whole series. Also, I guess I can't really blame a new showrunner for not living up to the standard of the last one, especially after they were handed the reins to a story that was objectively finished and told to make this last another season or two. Nightmare was directed by Phil Screecha, who has a directing credit on at least one episode in every season throughout the entire series with the exception of the final season, but has apparently followed series creator Eric Kripke throughout most of his ventures into TV, including his recent success with The Boys and even his less successful series Revolution, or from what I can tell watching the trailer, The Walking Dead without zombies. This might be the first time we're flying without any sort of X-Files safety net. I mean, you still got some executive producers. You got John Shibon and Kim Manners. So that's something. But then why am I still so scared? Nightmare is another episode, like many in Season 1, that when viewed as a piece in the great oeuvre of Supernatural, feels as though it is lifted directly from a completely different series. The grim subject matter and dour, near-humorless tone of this episode makes it stand out from the pack, especially when you consider that it follows an episode about a killer truck. This vibe starts off immediately in our cold open, which depicts a man arriving home at night and is by some unseen force murdered in a way that looks like a suicide. This is revealed to be a Deadly Premonition director's cut that Sam was having, and this is also, incidentally, how I wake up every time my body allows me to sleep. Just wet and panicked, full of shame. Sam rouses Dean out of bed and says that they need to go to the place he saw in his dream, which they track down by the Michigan license plate he saw. Every time I see this episode, I'm never prepared for the slickest scene transition ever.
We have to go. Right now.
Oh, fuck yeah. Alright, Phil. You got ideas. Always a welcome surprise when a supernatural director displays any measure of creativity. What are the lice doing here? Oh! They pull up to the address to find that Sam's vision had come true, but they arrived too late to intervene. The victim, Jim Miller, is dead of an apparent suicide. The next day, Sam wants to find some means of snooping around the house, but since this happened hours ago, and I'd imagine is still pretty fresh for Jim's grieving family, the boys decide to pose as not law enforcement, but priests, and infiltrate a sort of impromptu wake the neighbors have organized. Meeting Jim's wife, Alice, and his brother-in-law, Roger. Alice is played by Beth Broderick, and not to jump off the topic of X-Files. Supernatural, but before this I knew her mostly as Aunt Zelda from the show Sabrina the Teenage Witch, which is interesting only because that show was on ABC for half of its lifespan before the WB saved it from cancellation. They then wrote out many of its recurring characters and had Sabrina go to college where the aunt characters are no longer necessary, so they left the show and then the showrunners decided to wrap it up not long after. Just an early example of the WB stretching things out until they drift away into vapor, making a show last so long it forgets what it is. This seemingly innocuous little moment where Dean grabs a cocktail weenie mid-conversation was apparently an ad-lib that the writers then began to continuously add to scripts, explaining why throughout the series Dean seems to inhale any kind of snack or food put in front of him, an important step on his journey to just becoming Scooby-Doo. Dean is able to determine that there's been no typical signs of a haunting, but heads upstairs to snoop further. fuck is that? Never mind, this is a very funny episode. Dean sweeps the upstairs with whatever this thing is, and determines definitively that there are no signs of restless spirits. By the way, I hate to call out the wiki again, because I know a lot of work must have gone into it, but y'all are fucking up over there. You included a trivia entry saying this is the only time the infrared thermal scanner that Dean is using shows up in the series, when a mere 2 episodes from now. What's that? Oh weird, it's a fucking thing that was in the other episode. Sam has a conversation with Jim's creepy son Max, who clearly answered a casting call for wet-eyed, soon-to-be serial killer that just started experimenting. He's the one who found the body, but the questioning doesn't seem to go anywhere. At their motel, Sam suffers a painful headache, followed by another vision, this time while already fully awake. In it, Jim's brother-in-law is decapitated by putting his head into one of the guillotine-like windows he had installed. They once again race over to the would-be victim, and on the way over, Sam expresses how confused and afraid he is of his advancing abilities, trying in vain to open a dialogue with Dean about it, who continuously waves it away, assuring him that they'll figure it out. They show up in time and try to warn Roger, but he wants nothing to do with them, locking them out of his apartment building. They race up the fire escape to... God damn, this is another nice shot, Phil. You should do this for a living. Once again, they are too late to stop the Phantom Murderer. I mean, this one, it'd be hard to sell as either a suicide or an accident, so if you ask me, I'd say some kind of ghost did it. Not to constantly harp on about things I like this era that other eras ignore, but this episode has 2 moments that really stand out to me and display the first era's attention to grounding thing, to making these brothers feel like real people with a real job they've lived with for a long time. The first one is their conversation in the motel, which for the entirety of Dean is kind of idly cleaning all the guns in the Impala's trunk arsenal. It's one of those things that you never see him do, but you have to imagine he would do, and it's appropriate that he does this very confidently on autopilot, as though he's done it a million times before. The other is right after they witness Roger's death. Sam looks really distraught and like he's just disassociating, but Dean looks at what's happened for a moment before quickly compartmentalizing it and telling Sam to wipe his prints off the handrails. It's a good character detail showing that Dean is very much the big brother here, the one stowing away his own feelings to see them through this obstacle, and it harkens back to a time in the show when they cared about evading the police and not implicating themselves in crimes, which was an element I enjoyed a lot and felt was sorely missing from the other 2/3 of the series. They have no idea what is causing this, but assume it's something seeking revenge on members of the Miller family. So they go to talk to Max again, who is holding up surprisingly well considering his father and uncle are dead, though he does seem rattled when the conversation moves to his childhood home. With no other leads, they go to his old neighborhood and talk to his neighbors. Oh, Jesus Christ. I was starting to get afraid that nobody with a substantial X-Files acting credit was going to show up. Whew! Crisis averted. This guy was in the episode Zero Sum, which is funnily enough an episode about bees killing people, which is apparently a concept you can make a good episode out of. All you need is better everything. So this neighborman, who is credited as neighborman, reveals that Max's father was an alcoholic and majorly abusive to Max as a child. Alice, who is actually his stepmother, would just sort of check out while this happened. In the middle of this conversation, Sam begins to have another vision. In this one, Sam can clearly see Max threatening and killing Alice for refusing to stop his father. He does this using what appears to be telekinetic powers, which I gotta say, this guy's performance, big as it may be, is really intense.
But every time he stood there and watched, pretending it wasn't happening.
And the subject matter is not fun, but I like that this situation isn't black and white. It isn't as simple as kill the monster, even though Dean seems to consider it that in their ensuing argument. Max is justifiably upset. He's also just a person, which would turn this hunt into a literal murder cover-up. There's also the worrying fact that Sam seems psychically linked to him. This time the boys show up on time and interrupt Max, but their cover as priests is blown when Max notices Dean's gun. From that point, it becomes a hostage situation with Sam trying to reason with him and talk him down, and he's completely honest with him because he sees Max as salvageable, or rather, he has to because he's secretly terrified that he himself is becoming whatever Max is. They have a long conversation where we learn that Max's biological mother died in the exact same way as Jess and their mother. He tries to assure him that he's not alone and that they can figure out what's happening to them together, but he has to let his stepmother live. Ultimately, he cannot be reasoned with, seeing his continued abuse as a child, and indeed an adult, as unforgivable, though you can read a sense of understanding. He gets that he could probably walk away from this and that Sam and Dean could help him, but at this point, he feels this is the only way he can achieve closure, locking Sam in a closet while he heads upstairs to finish the job. Dean tries to get in the way of the two, but is shot in the head and killed, and that was the end of the series. The CW had felt they peaked and cancelled not only Supernatural, but their entire lineup of shows, opting to turn the network into a 24-hour loop of What I Like About You.
What I like about you really know how to dance.
Dean, I'm coming! Sammy! Dean, Sam! Now, this was of course another vision Sam was having, and in this moment of desperation after seeing his brother killed, he somehow manages to move the dresser that was holding the door closed. On one hand, very cool. On the other hand, maybe don't tell Dean about that. Sam makes one last attempt to talk Max down, telling him that even if he kills her, it won't end his pain, a cold truth that he solemnly agrees with before shooting himself. Outside, Sam reflects on their own childhood, deciding that all things considered, and nomadic monster hunting training aside, it was pretty good in comparison to Max's. As they prepare to leave town, Sam tells Dean that he moved something with his mind. Dean predictably reacts nonchalantly and even makes a joke of it, but the final shot lingers on his face, a face that is fearful of what's to come. You and me both, buddy. This isn't a particularly fun episode. Obviously, it's some rough themes we're dealing with, but I do think it is a good episode, and I guess you could say it's a lore episode, but there is plenty happening in it, so it doesn't feel like that was its only purpose. Some really strong performances from Max, and Alice's tearful testimony at the end is really intense. Yeah, I mean, there are a couple of comedy beats in this one, and some bits that are clearly just them ad-libbing.
Our dark spots are pretty dark. You're dark.
They were obviously having fun making this one.
Hey, I'm Sam. I'm sorry about your dad.
What kind of priest are you?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Tell the truth. You can't tell me this doesn't freak you out.
This doesn't freak me out.
No, man, I moved it. Like Max.
Oh. Good afternoon. I'm Father Simmons. This is Father Freely.